did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Good evening. The energy bill is being voted on in Parliament as we speak. There are potential provisions that could put you in prison. Yes, you, a private householder, if you don't meet up to net zero requirements. How on earth have we got to this point? We also have an exclusive interview with a Blade Runner, somebody who was going around vandalising a huge number of ULEZ cameras. We'll find out his motivations and ask the moral question, is what they're doing right or wrong? And it's not just coming home, it's come home. We've just won the World Cup at football. You don't know what it's about? You'll find out later on in this show. But before all of that, let's get the news with Aaron Armstrong.
Very good evening to you. I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB newsroom. The Mayor of the West Midlands says the financial issues affecting Birmingham City Council are deeply concerning and the people there deserve so much better. Europe's largest local authorities declared it's effectively bankrupt due to a £760 million bill for equal pay claims. The Conservative Mayor, Andy Street, says it raises concerns about the way the Labour-led council's been run. All new spending, with the exception of vital services and protecting vulnerable people, will stop immediately. The government is to relax planning permission for new onshore wind farms. The changes, which come into force immediately, mean communities can apply to their local authority to have turbines built. Communities may also benefit from cheaper energy. The government hopes the new rules will help avoid a potential rebellion from some of its backbenchers. The Shadow Energy Secretary Ed Miliband says reluctance to build more wind farms has led to higher energy costs.
Government is being held to ransom by a bunch of Tory backbenchers who since 2015 have stopped onshore wind being built in England. And that has raised bills for families by £180 for every family in Britain. You know, we're going through a cost of living crisis. Surely now those individuals, those Conservative MPs can see that it's much better to have onshore wind built and cut bills for families.
The Schools Minister says the government has been very proactive in dealing with the concrete crisis and has been issuing guidance since 2018. More than 100 schools in England and 33 in Scotland are at risk of collapse due to aerated concrete. Other public buildings have also been closed, including a theatre in Dartford. Both Gillian Keegan and the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak are under growing pressure over the issue. Laughing gas will be banned, and those caught in possession of the drug will face unlimited fines or up to 2 years in jail. New measures, expected to be introduced this year, will also see tougher penalties for the supply and production of the drug. It's been linked to antisocial behaviour with heavy use, possibly leading to anemia, nerve damage or paralysis. 10 people have been taken to hospital after a bus collided with a car on the Cleddau Bridge in Pembrokeshire. In West Wales, one of the drivers was trapped and had to be freed by firefighters and was then subsequently evacuated by air ambulance. And Spain's Football Federation has sacked Jorge Vilda, the coach of its winning World Cup women's team. Vilda was the only member of the coaching staff not to stand down in protest after the midfielder Jenny Hermoso was kissed on the lips by Federation President Luis Rubiales. This is GB News live across the UK. I'll be back with more in just under an hour's time, but now it's over to Nigel.
Good evening. Well, term time has begun. There is no RAAC concrete in Westminster. Yep, the kids are all back at school and they're busy. Yesterday is a really big day. It's the third reading of the energy bill. Now, this is all about us becoming compliant with our net zero targets and a very major push for renewables, in particular, the emphasis being with onshore wind. And you might have seen Ed Miliband in that clip on the news a moment ago, and the government saying, look, we've got to stop this ban, we must build more onshore wind. There are two things going on here. One is the continued cult of net zero, that the UK must be a world leader, we must get to net zero more quickly than any other developed country. The second is the continued belief that renewable energy is plentiful, free and cheap, which frankly it has never ever been, and goodness knows how many times on this programme we've been through the problems of intermittency and the need to back it all up, let alone the fact that cost-wise it just doesn't work without subsidy. But there's something else going on in this bill, which I believe to be far more sinister. And frankly, even though Parliament's just come back, I am totally astonished at the lack of media debate and coverage. We'll find out later on this evening what amendments have passed and what haven't, so we'll know the actual shape of this legislation before it heads to the House of Lords. But there are, unbelievably, it seems to me, provisions in this bill that would allow for the creation of criminal offences. I'm going to repeat that. Allow for the creation of criminal offences if businesses, and here's the rub, individual householders don't tell the truth or don't meet up to new energy requirements for their houses. It seems to me to be truly and utterly extraordinary. Yes, you can be prosecuted for providing false information about your house's energy efficiency or for the obstruction of an enforcement authority. This takes us down the direction where we will all have to have meters for water, meters for gas, meters for electricity. I'm still fighting like crazy against Thames Water, who keep sending me these, you must now give us a date to come and fit your water meter. I don't want one. They now tell me my bills will be higher unless I comply. But I can see with this legislation, all of this will become mandatory. What it represents to me is yet another potential massive expansion of the state and its power over our lives, and yet it is getting so little debate. Should the government be able to have these powers? I don't believe they should. Let me know your thoughts. Farage@gbnews.com. Lois Perry is a campaigner and director of Car 26. Lois, I guess, in a sense, this bill coming back today, as I say, the summer holes are over, the sun's shining. Been almost no pre-coverage of this debate at all.
Well, there wouldn't be any pre-coverage, would there? Because the mainstream media are ushering in the whole net zero agenda. But the net zero agenda is not about net zero, and it's nothing to do with being green. It's about, as you correctly stated just now, a power grab, more state control, and having less and less jurisdiction over our lives. And don't forget, if everything's smart metered, which one of the bits in the legislation there would, would account for, you won't be able to say no to a smart meter. And what does a smart meter mean? It means that your electricity, it means your life is remotely controlled in exactly the same way as a digital currency or whatever. You can have your, if you do a social media post, you can be switched off. You can have your hot water switched off remotely. I don't want to go down any conspiracy avenues, but this is really scary. And the government using secondary legislation to actually bring in criminal offences. That means a minister can go into work one morning and make up an offence, no scrutiny of Parliament, no going through the House of Lords. It's like COVID. I think they got a bit power hungry during COVID.
You're a campaigner. You've got an organisation.
Yeah.
The very idea that a minister could go for secondary legislation to create criminal offences, it strikes me as being fundamentally unconstitutional.
It's Orwellian.
Against the way we do things.
Yeah.
Is there not a network of people and organisations who could legally challenge this?
Yeah, I do believe there is. And the thing is, can you believe, Nigel, that this has been brought in by a Conservative government? I mean, Conservative in name, anyway. I mean, imagine what Labour Party will do with this. They're communists.
I'm not sure the Labour Party would be any different to this.
That you could literally... But I think at the moment we've got a situation where the people think, oh, OK, the Tories are bad, but Labour would be worse. I think that's the only thing that the Tories have got in their favour at the moment. But, no, you're right, it could be legally challenged. But who's going to legally challenge it when all this ESG stuff is going on? When you've got companies who, if they challenge anything or do anything, even advertising on the wrong TV station, that they can lose their ability to, borrow money on the market.
But many would say, Lois, that we face a climate emergency.
Yeah. Many would say we don't.
Well, no, but many would say that we would.
Yeah, OK.
And thousands of scientists can be reeled out to say this, and that it's our responsibility, morally, to lead the world in this. That we do this first and others will follow.
It's nonsense. All of the China, India, Africa, all of those countries are not taking a blind bit of notice of this. Even if you believe in the whole CO2 stuff causing, man-made climate change.
Do you not believe in it?
No. No,
at all?
No, I don't, because if you actually look throughout history, there's been periods where CO2 levels have been higher and the temperature has been lower, and also there's been periods in history where we've been much hotter than we are today, when there was no such thing as the Industrial Revolution. But that's my personal belief, which I'm entitled to. But more and more nowadays, you're not entitled to have any personal beliefs or personal opinions. But even if you do buy into the whole narrative, it's completely nonsensical. We make up less than 1% of global emissions. None of the other big countries or continents are doing this. This is about the deindustrialisation of the West. That's all it is. That's all it's about. It really, really is.
But we're told green jobs, green growth, Ed Miliband, you saw him on the news a moment ago. Cheap energy, loads of green jobs. This is what we're told. And there is a broad cross-party consensus on this.
Oh, yes.
In the House of Commons.
No, there is, because there's a globalist agenda to deindustrialise the West and to create what I believe is a neo-Marxist state. I really, really do. And I think they used COVID. And they say power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts, absolutely. They're a bit, oh, my God, we haven't got COVID anymore. Right, OK, climate emergency. They want to be able, the ministers, to come into work one morning, create a law, and it be enacted the next day.
Why?
Because it's absolute power corrupts, absolutely.
You may be right, Lois Perry. Thank you. Now, you may agree or disagree with what Lois said there. I am agnostic, completely agnostic, on whether carbon dioxide, by the way, without which the world can't survive and plants can't grow, I'm completely agnostic on whether increasing levels of CO2 put temperatures up or not. I simply don't know. My position is what we're doing in the name of trying to get to net zero, to stop temperatures rising, is actually self-defeating and being ignored, as Lewis did say, by China, India, Indonesia, and many, many others. Well, joining me is a former Member of Parliament and former Minister, Angela Knight, and, of course, former Chief Executive of Energy UK. Angela, in your roles as Economic Secretary of the Treasury and working in energy, the first point I want to come to with you is this fundamental point about the relationship between government and the individual. As I say, we don't yet know the final shape of this legislation until we see what the amendments are and how it's voted on. But to me, Angela, the very idea that this legislation could give a minister the potential, through secondary legislation, to create criminal offences surely goes against everything we believe in, regardless of the issue.
Yeah, it does. I mean, I totally agree with you, actually, Nigel. And I think your last guest said, you know, well, or you said, well, who's got any locus on sorting this out? And the answer is, it is the members of Parliament. And I would have thought that the members of Parliament actually would get to grips with something that is this draconian as it is being reported at the moment. And whilst there may be a case in certain circumstances to have a backstop power for the purposes of, I don't know, rogue landlords or something along those sorts of lines, what there doesn't seem to meet is it right at all to say that you as an individual, unless you insulate your house more, we're going to fine you a something great amount of money. We used to have something called the nudge unit. Do you remember the nudge unit?
Yeah.
The nudge unit, it's called something else now, but the nudge unit was all about saying, instead of doing the stick bit, do the carrots. Get people to act in enlightened self-interest. And that was what the nudge unit's about, and that's what should be used in the case of us all being better with our use of energy, in the sense that we don't leave all the lights on, you know, we do a bit more insulation. We basically act in a little bit more responsible way. That's what's required, not draconian powers. I don't agree with them anyway. And I sincerely hope there's enough members of Parliament there who, now it has been flagged up, wake up, smell the roses and know they've got to make some changes.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you, Angela. I think for rogue landlords, people who own vast amounts of property and let them, there could be people lying and cheating on all of this.
Exactly.
And that, yes, fine. You know, law needs to be enforced. The very thought that it could apply to private residences is beyond me. But isn't the fact that it's even being put on the table? As I say, I repeat, we don't yet know the final shape.
Yeah.
Doesn't it just show, since your time in Parliament, the extent to which we're moving into a period of big government?
And again, I think that is something that certainly we have all felt for some time, that more and more of government is intruding into lives in a way that really should not be the case. I appreciate that COVID has just been mentioned, and the pandemic and the lockdown and all those sorts of things. And yes, I think many of us did find that whilst very important points were made, especially at the start when we didn't know what on earth this disease was, that once, you know, the medical science had got a grips to it, that telling us and in ordering us to do X and not do Y was a bit too far. I mean, I think that the energy bill, to get back to the point in hand, shouldn't be talking about fining us. It should be talking about how we're going to fund small-scale nuclear power, what are we going to do about the grid, all those other things, Nigel, which are so important if we're going to do what I think we ought to do, and that is make ourselves more energy secure, more self-sustainable generally, and be careful generally on our environment, on our waste, because it's a world that we want to pass on to our children, grandchildren, and many more generations. Excuse me, and that isn't a question of, am I a net zero, yes, or am I net zero, no. I think I'm common sense. I think I sit in the reasonable category of wanting to do the right thing, but not having criminal legislation put up the back of me. And I'm losing my voice.
I know. Well, I'll give you a couple of moments off by asking you a final thought and question. If you can recover in time, and I hope you can. Will you be pleased, Angela, if you look out of your window in rural England and see a great big, huge onshore wind farm. Is that the right direction for us to be going in? Because it seems outside of the authoritarian stuff, that's the big push, the big change that's coming today. Do onshore wind farms work?
Great big ones? No, I wouldn't like to see it. If I lived in a community, a village, you've got some hills, it doesn't intrude particularly, and we get some serious benefits from it. And anybody who is badly affected gets compensation. You know, we have compulsory purchase arrangements in the UK, long-standing ones, because when people do get impacted by infrastructure, they need to be bought out. So done on that way, then I'd say there is a future for them.
Okay.
But what I don't agree with is carpeting our hills. No, but if local communities agree and it's done in that sensitive way, then it's a different kettle of fish altogether.
Well, Angela, I think a little wind turbine for home generation in rural areas might work, but these vast arrays on England's green and pleasant land, I think are vile. We'll agree on that one to disagree, but as ever, I'll thank you. Thank you again.
We agree on that one, Nigel. We agree on that one.
OK, thank you for coming on the programme, Angela, as ever. In a moment, we have an exclusive interview with a Blade Runner. These are the people dedicated to vandalising the ULEZ cameras. In a moment, we'll find out the motivation of the man that we interview, and I'll ask you to have a think. Morally, is what he's doing right? It's outside the law, but is it morally right or wrong?
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
I asked you, should the government have powers to to make us criminals if we don't live up to their net zero expectations? Your answers, I guess, fairly predictably. Ryan says this is an absolute disgrace. The whole green agenda is about power and control. How long until we are fined for eating too much meat or going on holiday too often? Well, Ryan, once we have a central bank digital currency, this will all become very easy for government. Steve says most houses in this country have been built to the current building regulations. As for huge unwanted bills, I just haven't got the money. Looks like prison for a lot of pensioners. And finally, David says, if we don't pay our TV licence, we'll go to court and be prosecuted. Unable to pay council tax, prison. Enter the country illegally, you get put in a luxury hotel, given pocket money. Say no to net zero prosecutions. David, I don't think this will come to pass. For me, and the reason I've debated it tonight, is I think it's outrageous that it's even been put on the table. Now, we are exactly 1 week in to the extension of the ULEZ zone. It was this time last week we were doing a live show from Cudham, right on the borders of Kent County Council and Greater London, the furthest point from central London at which these cameras have been put. There was huge passion there. And one of the things we touched on, has been happening ever since, is the sheer level of vandalism to the cameras. I am told that up to 800 cameras have been vandalised. Now, GB News' Ray Addison has conducted an exclusive interview with one of the most prominent Blade Runners, as they're called. We have clearly kept the geography within London, or Greater London, secret. We've disguised his voice, but it is a very interesting and very revealing interview.
This is what one man can do to the ULEZ in less than half a day.
Some call them vigilantes, others criminals. They call themselves the ULEZ Blade Runners. Around 100 activists, all using any means necessary to disable cameras, taking the fight against the London Mayor's clean air policy to the streets. Lee is part of a small group of saboteurs who go out most weeks. Speaking exclusively on camera to GB News, he says Sadiq Khan is targeting the city's most vulnerable.
To charge the poorest of people to drive around is unacceptable. Sadiq Khan talks about the fact that 9 out of 10 of cars are compliant. If 9 cars out of 10 are compliant, who are the 1 in 10? The 1 in 10 are the poorest people, the ones who can't afford a compliant car. So they're the ones you're charging. So therefore it's a tax on the poor. It's that simple.
But the Mayor of London disputes that claim.
The decision to expand the ultra-emission zone to all of London was a difficult one. It wasn't an easy one, but I think it's a vital decision and it's the right one. Let me tell you why. We now know the evidence in relation to the consequences of air pollution. It leads to around 4,000 premature deaths a year. It leads to children having stunted lungs forever, adults with a whole host of health issues from asthma to cancer, dementia to heart disease. We also now know that one of the most effective ways to reduce air pollution is with the ULEZ. How do we know that? In central London, we've seen a reduction of around 50% of toxicity, nitrogen dioxide. Also, a third fewer children being admitted to hospital with air pollution-related illnesses.
The Blade Runners are supported by an online community that maps the location of London's almost 2,700 ULEZ cameras. The red pins show working units. The black ones have been disabled.
I will normally go around on the groups to see posts or pictures of people that have put up with cameras, particularly the new ones if they've just been put up near to where I live. And then, yeah, I'll literally make a note of that, jot that down, and then I'll arrange a date as to when I will go out and I will deal with that camera on that specific evening.
According to the Met, crimes relating to ULEZ cameras rocketed by 77% in August. Lee says he's personally disabled more than 60 cameras in the last year. He's developed his own technique, which bypasses TfL's security measures in a matter of seconds. GB News has decided not to show footage of the way the cameras might be disabled to avoid the risk of copycats.
It's important to stress, of course, that what you're doing is illegal. Do you consider yourself to be a criminal?
I'm not a criminal in any way, shape or form. You know, I'm just literally I'm doing what I believe is right, and I'll stand by that, and I'll sit on that hill until the time comes when I'm no longer allowed to.
Although TfL says the ULEZ expansion will bring health benefits to a further 5 million people living in Greater London, Lee questions that justification, saying this has nothing to do with air pollution.
You know, we've seen videos, there's video evidence of people living in houses with black mould, mushrooms growing off the wall. So this notion that 4,000 deaths a year from car pollution is utter nonsense.
Other groups would strongly disagree. Leo Murray is Director of Innovation at Possible, the climate action group.
Basically, about half of the air pollution, the stuff that's in the air that is dangerous to human health, out in the environment, not inside our homes, about half of that comes from motor traffic. So, you know, that this is not in dispute. This is extremely well understood science.
Meanwhile, Lee is adamant that the Blade Runners will not stop their sabotage.
There's enough of us, myself included, where we're not going to give up. We're not going to give up until either all them cameras are gone, or TfL and Sadiq Khan or the next mayor turns around and scraps the idea completely.
A Transport for London spokesperson said the ULEZ is vital in tackling the triple challenges of air pollution, the climate emergency and congestion. Vandalism on our network is unacceptable, and all incidents are reported to the police for investigation. Criminal damage to ULEZ cameras puts the perpetrators at risk of prosecution and life-changing injuries, while simultaneously risking the safety of the public. The ULEZ is not about making money, and annual net revenue from ULEZ will fall below zero by 2026-27 as compliance increases. Ray Addison, GB News.
Well, great piece of work there from Ray Addison, a very interesting interview. You got something of the motivation of the guy that is one of the most prominent Blade Runners in London. I want to make it clear that we as a station, as a channel, don't condone law breaking in any way at all. But I must say I was very surprised last week to see Ian Duncan Smith, of all people, Sir Ian, saying he absolutely understood why people in his part of outer London were doing this. To me, I feel this is the biggest outbreak of lawlessness we've seen in the country since poll tax and the riots back in 1990. There are some that say to me, well, this will all go away before very long. But just have a look at this map and you'll see that is a live map of the damage. You can see in black the damaged cameras on the outskirts of London. This 1 week on. And every day, Khan's ULEZ vans are going around, putting up new cameras, and they are being removed. I have a feeling that this campaign isn't going to stop any time soon. I don't think there's any stopping the Blade Runners. Quite where this ends, I don't know. But despite all the claims, and by the way, as with GB News, you saw both sides of the argument during that package. But the arguments that it reduces congestion, the ULEZ extension, is clearly nonsense. The idea that it helps air quality just doesn't hold. This is a tax on the oldest, the poorest, the self-employed. It's the most iniquitous tax I've seen in my lifetime. And I cannot support law breaking, but I can't wait to see ULEZ scrapped. In a minute, it isn't just coming home, it's come home. Did you know we just won the World Cup at football? In a minute, I'll tell you how.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton, for 2 hours packed full of unfiltered opinions, unique takes, and fiery debates. I guarantee you blockbuster guests and exclusive reporting with no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I think there is a culture of collusion, quite frankly.
And no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight on TV, radio, and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan Tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
On the back of the banking route, we've led the way as a channel for Don't Kill Cash. And yes, we've had some very, very warm words coming from a Chancellor, the City Minister. But what's the reality of us being able to take out and deposit cash? Well, today it was Treasury questions. And David Davis made this point.
David Davis. The Minister just told my honourable friend that he's going to underwrite the statutory right to access to cash, but 6,000 bank branches will have closed by the end of the year, leaving only 4,000 in place. 15,000 ATMs have closed in the last 5 years. How's he going to make sure this actually happens rather than just an empty promise?
Minister. The FCA have significant sanctions in respect of the closure of ATMs that would leave those communities without the right of free access to cash. In terms of the closure of bank branches, we are seeing a very significant change, and I hope my honourable friend would respect the fact that technology is changing, consumer patterns are changing. During the recess, I had the privilege of visiting the excellent community banking hub in Brixham. I think that's a brilliant opportunity. There should be more than 100 on their way, and it's my objective to...
Well, I'm joined by Professor Daniel Hodson, former Deputy CEO and Financial Director of Nationwide. Daniel, those just sheer numbers that David Davis put out there in the House of Commons today. Since 2015, I mean, not long ago, there will, by the end of 2023, be 6,000 bank closures and only 4,000 remaining open.
It's frightening. It's frightening. And it's one of those things which I suppose is a feature of the times, but it's one which I think can be taken slowly and carefully. It's quite interesting. My former employer, the Nationwide, actually aren't closing branches. They're keeping them open for another 3 years at least to see how it goes. And I think that's the right thing to do for a couple of reasons. One, because it's clear that people like cash. A lot of people use it. It's a very important issue. But also, strange enough, something which I found, I was a director of the organisation, that actually you found out what was going on in the market. We used to spend a day or two a week going around branches, talking to people, very bright people.
Good intel. Good intel.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the trouble is the banks have all become too diversified now. They have too many things on their plate, and they're not really concentrating on what, particularly on the retail side, on what the customers want.
Now, the Minister made a good point, Andrew Griffith, about the hub concept.
Yes.
The idea that in one building, all the banks and building societies could be represented.
Yes.
And you could put in cash, take out cash, do transfers, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And yet, of the 77 hubs that have been proposed, only 7 are open. Only 7 are open, which says to me that actually the big clearing banks aren't interested.
I'm afraid they're not. They've got lots of things they want to do, and it's something that people like you can actually do something about. I think the issue which is lurking behind this is the use of cash, and whether or not we ought to be able to use cash at all times in every place where we go to buy. Now, we're in a world where digital things are taking over, and I suspect, I know there's a difference of views about it, that a retail digital pound will come.
A central bank digital currency. They're employing people to work on it.
They are. It will come. I hope and pray that it will be limited in terms of its use, but it will be useful for people, on the one hand, for people who aren't banked at the moment, who might have the opportunity to use it as an alternative.
And then government can control everything we do and everything we spend.
Exactly, and that's one of the other sides of it. Of course, one of the things, if you think, for instance, when you buy a few gallons of petrol, you pay an awful lot of tax to the government. Now, if you're not buying petrol, how does the government get the tax? Well, it'll probably impose a toll. So when you get in your car, you'll get taxed, in effect, but digitally, for the number of miles you've done. Now, how are they going to do that? Think of that in terms of...
They'll put a black box in the car, they'll take the money automatically, they'll stop us going to Marbella because we've used up our carbon. I'm going to fight this like blooming crazy. Like blooming crazy. And talking of banks, reported in the FT today, the investigation into what happened between me and NatWest and Coutts. Apparently, Travers Smith, the City law firm, who should have reported by the 8th of September, now will not report for another couple of weeks. Seems to me that with the Farage row, what they really want to make sure is that Alison Rose leaves with her 11 million quid and that Sir Howard Davis sees out his term till the end of May.
Well, I think it's very interesting. And to me, one of the key issues, Nigel, is how much did the board and Howard Davis know?
Well, I have put in a subject access request to NatWest, which should have come back within 30 days. I've been told because it's complex, it won't come back to the end of October.
I cannot believe, having worked with Chairman as a chief executive, that they weren't absolutely like that in terms of what was going on here. And whether that comes out or not, and I'm told that a lot of staff will actually be kept out from the public report, remains to be seen. But it's a shame because, as my understanding was, it was due out at the end of this week. And heaven knows when it's going to be now.
No, they've kicked it into the long grass.
Into the long grass.
Daniel Hodson, always great. You come and join us. Let's hope Hodson's wrong and we don't get that central bank digital currency. Now, football. The women got through and lost in the final of the World Cup. It was 1966 the last time that our men's football team was in the World Cup final and won. But something that happened last week that hasn't having a lot of coverage, but maybe will as the years go by, is the concept of walking football. Now, Paul Carr is the founder and president of the Federation of International Walking Football Associations. Paul, I got to tell you, until about 18 months ago, I didn't know anything about walking football, but I'm beginning to understand a lot of people of, shall we say, mature years are taking part in walking football. For the uninitiated, in a couple of seconds, tell us what it is.
Thank you, Nigel. Yes, it was invented in Chesterfield 12 years ago, so it's still a very young sport. There's now 200,000 people playing it in England alone, and it's played in 70 countries around the world. Basically, it's a significant variation of football. The two key differences are it's aimed at the older generations, and it's non-contact, and you're not allowed to run, which is sometimes quite difficult for the older generation who are playing football.
And is it a competitive sport? Is it a genuine competitive sport?
It is. We had 19 nations at St George's Park, which is obviously the home of English football. 26 teams with an over 50s group and an over 60s group, and England won both. And it was fantastic tournament. We were playing on the Sir Alf Ramsey pitch, which was very apt, given that he was the manager of the 66 team. And all the players were brilliant. We won against France in one final, and we beat the Czech Republic in the other final. But everybody really enjoyed themselves. And the England teams obviously are playing at this level. The majority of people are playing walking football just do it for fun and fitness and friendship.
So we are the World Cup winners of walking football for the over 50s and over 60s, correct?
We are, and we're going to be doing a World Cup for the over 70s probably next year, so we might get another one.
Well, I think it's amazing. And you say, Paul, there are 200,000 active participants of walking football in this country. Is this the next big growth sport for those of more mature years?
I think it is. I mean, it's really bigger than netball. It's probably bigger than hockey. So it's a bit of a secret because, as you say, it hasn't had much media exposure. It's purely amateur at the moment, so that's one of the reasons. We would love to get more media exposure, and thank you for having us on, because we've been in some of the newspapers, but and we've got all the actions on the streaming channel Recast, so people can go and watch it, and it is entertaining. It might be a bunch of old guys running around or walking around, hopefully.
And if someone's caught running, what will the ref do?
They'll get a free kick, and if they do it 3 times, they'll get sin bin for 3 minutes.
Right. Well, Paul Carr, I have to say, you are the pioneer of a sport, and any sport that has 200,000 active participants is growing and has just won the World Cup is very worthy, I think, of being on GB News. And thank you for joining us and enlightening us, and many, many congratulations. Well, there we are. We won a World Cup of football. How about that? Had you ever heard of walking football before? I bet many of you actually hadn't. So Birmingham City Council is, believe it or not, the biggest council with the biggest budget, not just in the UK, but in the whole of Europe. And today, it effectively went bankrupt. What does that mean for the people of Birmingham? And other implications for other councils around the country, bearing in mind that just in the last year or so, Thurrock and Croydon went bust too. All of that in just a moment.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners on TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train. Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Well, if Birmingham City Council is effectively bankrupt, we need to find out the reasons why. And I just wonder what the reaction to all of this has been today. Perhaps one of incredulity. I don't know. Will Hollis is our GB News reporter who is there on the spot. Will, what's going on and what are people saying?
Yes, well, it was here today earlier that Birmingham City Council declared the S114 notice, and essentially, Nigel, what that is the equivalent of a council waving a white flag and saying that our ship financially is sinking. They're calling on the government to help support the council as it can't quite balance its books. Now, ultimately, what this relates to is a massive £760 million black hole in the finances of Birmingham City Council, a Labour-run council. Some of it is because of complications to do with its IT system that has meant that around £100 million of extra money has to be put towards that. But the main reason that this council is in so much debt relates to a 2012 ruling by the Supreme Court. Now, essentially what that is an equal pay claim. It means that there was a problem with payments to men that weren't being given to women, specifically around bonuses in jobs at the council that were traditionally male-dominated industries. For example, bin men, whereas maybe teaching assistants who are part of a traditionally dominated female industry weren't given the same opportunities. Now, that bill has really run up to the tune of around £650 million, and the council today is saying that they can't afford to pay for it. What that means is that they are going to continue paying for their statutory obligations, adult health and social care, child services and education. However, things that are deemed to be non-essential services, for example, cultural events, will now be stripped away, and that S114 order means that they will be prevented from spending money on that kind of thing. Now, I was in Birmingham all day, and we've been hearing from the people of the city and their reaction to the council effectively filing for bankruptcy.
Yeah, it's just a shocker. It's just very surprising. It's just all down to the management, I believe, anyway. So
I'm quite shocked to hear this, knowing how amount of council tax they take, amount of property they own in Birmingham. It's one of the largest city council in Europe, and I don't know. I'm just when I heard this, I'm so surprised.
Well, I'm very, I'm concerned naturally for the residents of Birmingham, and also people who are, they're suffering financially at the moment, and I'm not surprised. But after the Commonwealth Games, and we were promised all that money, and it's going to be great for the city, what's happened. But I understand the reason why, because of the pay demands.
Oh, it's just the way it is in Birmingham, isn't it?
Now, the Labour-run council has said that this is necessary for it to get its financial affairs in order. But there's been a loud reaction from the Conservative group here in Birmingham, saying that this is embarrassing for the city. Remember, it was only a year ago that the next 10 years were described as a golden decade, particularly around the highlight that the Commonwealth Games brought to the West Midlands. Now, of course, those services are going to be slashed, and it appears that a really tough time is coming for the people of Birmingham City.
Yeah, Will, I wonder, with this equalities legislation, if Birmingham is in such a glue pot, I wonder what the implications might be for other councils around the country. And there's not something you can answer, but I'm very, very thoughtful on it. But I do note, Will, that one thing that Birmingham City Council have been very good at is choosing what they believe to be appropriate street names for new developments, such as Equality Road, Diversity Grove, Destiny Road, Inspire Avenue, Respect Way and Humanity Close. Is this perhaps a politically correct council that finds itself at odds with many of their electors and at odds with the way they've treated women?
Yes, well, Birmingham City, as one of the most ethnically diverse cities in the country, is very proud of that diversity, and it has been, as you say, introducing all sorts of things that might emphasise that. So I think equality in this sense is something that the council is striving for, but in particular to the pay claims, the bonuses were specifically for male-dominated industries. You won't necessarily see this in other councils because it seems to be a decision that was made by Birmingham City Council to offer these bonuses in this way. The Supreme Court ruled and ordered for the council to make these payments, but the cost is really spiralling out of control, which is why we see this S114 order today. And it's actually going up every single month, Nigel, by £14 million that the council is going to have to pay back, adding to the tremendous amount that it already has, £750 million.
Will Hollis, extraordinary stuff. Thank you for giving us that live report outside the town hall in Birmingham. Isn't devolution a funny old thing? You've got a Labour-run Birmingham council, a Conservative mayor. It's all a mess. Now, we began the programme talking, I think with some passion, about the energy bill, which has been before the House of Commons today. Hundreds of amendments, but whittled down, I believe, to far fewer votes. Well, who better? Who better than a man who's arrived here hot foot? I would say out of breath, but he's far too cool to ever appear to be out of breath. It's not really his style. But, of course, a former energy minister. Jacob, brief us what has been going on. Really odd. You know, the House of Commons comes back, term begins, a very important piece of legislation, and almost nothing in terms of public debate.
And we were given 3 hours in which to debate 174 pages of amendments. So it was squeezed into the smallest amount of time. The government put on 2 very routine statements to take the time available down. And I was, as you point out, Energy Secretary, albeit very briefly. Whilst I was trying to defang this bill. I knew it was a bad bill and it was my responsibility, but I wasn't there long enough to be able to stop it. What it does is it's put charges on people. It's £20 billion potentially for carbon capture and storage. It sets up other ways to charge people, and it gives the government the power to set a criminal offence with a maximum of 1 year in prison if you get your energy rating certificate wrong.
How can this be happening in our country, Jacob?
In a Conservative government. And what's particularly frustrating is that post-Uxbridge, it seemed the noises coming out from Downing Street understood that this zealotry about net zero didn't win votes and wasn't going to be good for the economy. And yet here we are 2 days in, we have ploughed on with this dreadful piece of legislation.
Just astonishing.
I hot-footed it to get here on time. So I didn't wait for the result of the third reading vote.
You've given us...
But very few will have voted against.
You've given us a little snippet of what's to come in the next hour with Jacob. How is this happening in our country? Why don't we believe in liberty anymore? Well, the one good thing is, maybe tomorrow is another 12 hours of sunshine.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again. As we go through the next 24 hours, some of us will have a bit of low cloud and fog overnight, but then it's the return of the hot sunshine tomorrow, albeit with the chance of a few showers. Looking at the big picture, and you can see high pressure dominating the weather across the UK, but we are going to have something of an easterly wind pushing its way in, and on that easterly, we're going to drag in some low cloud, some sea fog in from the North Sea, affecting eastern parts of England and also eastern Scotland, where we're likely to see a little bit of drizzly rain overnight. Elsewhere, further south and west, clear skies, a few pockets of mist and fog though, and temperatures not dropping a huge amount. Some places staying above 20 Celsius tonight, a tropical night for some, but a difficult night for sleeping. A cloudy start then down the eastern side of the UK on Wednesday, but that low cloud, that murk, is going to quite quickly burn back towards the coast for most of us. I say for most because across eastern parts of Scotland we're likely to hold on to some of that low cloud. Otherwise, lots of sunshine around, but perhaps a bit cloudier for some, particularly across parts of Northern Ireland. Look at at those temperatures, though, a little bit higher than today, likely to see highs around 32 or 33 Celsius. Into Thursday, and there's the chance of some heavy thundery showers making their way northwards up the western side of the UK. More central and eastern parts of the country are likely to stay drier and sunnier, and temperatures are going to be similar to tomorrow, really. Again, likely to see highs of 32 or 33 before something perhaps cooler by the weekend.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how